Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the PhD thesis defense of Justin Luke. Justin joined us to work on mobility. So day one, he said he wanted to work on transportation, and Marco and I have recruited him to start some sort of collaboration. And he focused a majority of his work on how to design charging solutions and coordinate the charging for autonomous electric vehicle fleets. And then using similar techniques, he approached how to fix the way we charge the electric buses here on the campus. The amazing thing about his research is that it went all the way from optimization to actually implementing things. And his work has been implemented at Cruise. And in our own backyard here, all the Stanford buses can use this schedule as well. So, looking forward to listening to your presentation, Justin.
Thank you, Ron. All right, recording is in progress. Thank you everyone for being here today. I'll be presenting my thesis research on optimization models for sustainable large-scale EV fleets, both planning and operations. Let's see if I can exit this. Perfect. So let's talk about the problem at hand. Transportation today, in its status quo, is both deadly and costly. Most directly, we have road traffic deaths are responsible for over 1 million deaths per year globally. We also see that cars are poorly utilized as an asset. On average, cars are parked for about 96% of the day, and in 4% that they are used, they have an average occupancy of 1.5 people. So as a result,
averaging what, buses also?
This is just passenger cars in the United States. So as a result, we have very car-centric urban design. A lot of the surfaces in our city are covered for road space and parking. Lastly, greenhouse gases and air pollutants have a significant contribution from transportation. There's 5 million deaths per year attributed to fossil fuel derived air pollution, of which transportation is responsible for half of the nitrous oxides. And additionally, 14.5 million deaths from now to year 2050, and billions of damages associated with climate change impacts, of which transportation is about a quarter, and actually a growing percentage in countries that don't have as much electric vehicle adoption. Fortunately, we do have safe, efficient and sustainable mobility options. To improve safety, autonomous vehicles in the first 3.8 million miles of data collected by Swiss Reinsurance have shown 100% reduction in bodily injuries compared to 4 on average for the same operating region. Public transit has also been shown to be many times safer for both the occupants and also vulnerable road users. In addressing efficiency, shared mobility can improve the utilization and occupancy of our vehicles, and 50% adoption of autonomous ride-hail services can lead to also about 50% reduction in vehicle fleet size. Lastly, electric vehicles are promising for their zero tailpipe emissions, and on average reduce 51% of greenhouse gas lifetime emissions impact compared to an internal combustion engine or ICE vehicle. Although this has a large range from 5% to 76%. The two modes of mobility I will be addressing in my thesis research are electric autonomous mobility on demand, or simply electric ride-hail robotaxis, as well as electric buses. In particular, I'll do a deeper focus on the electrification aspect and sustainability. On decarbonizing mobility fleets, the first mechanism, of course, is to replace our fossil fuel fleets with electric vehicles. So that will get you the, on average, 51% reduction lifetime per vehicle replaced. But we want to drive that further. So with electric vehicles, we can also coordinate their charging with the varying grid mix, which has different carbon intensities on time of day, to increase that to closer to that 76% or beyond. However, these technologies are actually still in their infancy in adoption. For electric AMOD, we already achieved 28 million rider-only autonomous miles in the past 2 years. That's quite an achievement. This total tally across 3 companies, most of the miles are from Waymo. But this is still just a drop in the bucket compared to 3.2 trillion highway miles in the US. So there's like less than 1 in 100,000 miles. A long way to go. And one of these adoption struggles is in these urban environments where these electric robotaxis are operating, it's difficult to install additional charging infrastructure for their depots. In a study from Stanford, the most significant source of the delay is the grid capacity for DC fast chargers. And in some municipalities, the report states that they advise applicants to install level 2 chargers instead of DC fast charging to avoid these delays. So that's talking about the where of the grid, in terms of distribution grid, where can we install depends on grid impact, but also there's a question of when. If we were to satisfy all US mobility by autonomous shared EVs, that could lead in a very large peak load of 76 gigawatts in this particular study. And if this were to coincide with the current peak, that would be very costly to upgrade the grid. On electric buses, the adoption is greater than e-AMOD, but 2.8% is still quite small, and they face similar barriers to adoption. In King County, where Seattle operates bus fleets, electricity supply is again quoted as one of the adoption struggles. And in Dallas, cost and range anxiety for operating and coordinating bus fleet with less range in their diesel buses is still a challenge to electrify all of their routes in Dallas. Let's dive a little deeper about some of these challenges. So installing charging infrastructure, firstly, there's a question of if operations are in their loop. We could take look at historic data and assume future charging demand, but it's a bit of a moving target since electrification is still happening and it's hard to predict all future charging demand. There's also the question of what type of charging station to install. As we showed in the previous slide, level 2 versus DC fast charging have different impacts on the grid and would have different costs. And in providing mobility services, we're subject to battery EV constraints. So compared to ICE vehicles, they typically have shorter ranges, longer refueling times, and also more dynamic prices within a given day. Whereas gas prices might vary, say, weekly, electric prices can vary almost by 3x or 10x in a given day, depending on the market, if they use dynamic pricing, time of use rates, and so forth. This is also quite a complex problem to coordinate the range-constrained vehicles, electricity pricing, and we also want to solve this quickly. Because if you open your ride-hail app, say Uber or Lyft, you would like to understand your dispatch vehicles in the order of seconds. Lastly, we can leverage distributed energy resources, or DERs, to assist in the installation of these charging infrastructure and not have to wait for grid capacity to be available. But this does come with a high capital cost, so we need to very smartly leverage these DERs to defray these high capital costs. So my thesis research seeks to address each of those challenges, which occur at different spatial temporal timescales. Firstly, in the timescale of years, we have the planning problem. Most prominent is, as we discussed, charging infrastructure, but our work will also seek to inform fleet design, as well as vehicle sizing. Second, we'll pivot to the real-time operations, where we still want to maintain a large scale, so operating for thousands of vehicles in the fleet, while having performance on the order of seconds and ideally matching as close to optimal performance as possible. We will achieve this using a combination of optimization approaches and graph reinforcement learning. Thirdly, we'll discuss how to integrate DERs using an optimization framework. and particularly we'll focus on rooftop solar and battery energy storage systems. So diving into our first topic, planning. Here we want to do cost optimize and also operations aware planning for thousands of electric robotaxis. We'll talk about the complexity of this problem, how we form this as a network flow optimization, what does the optimal distribution look like compared to baseline distribution of charging stations, and also the advantages of smaller EVs despite their lower range. So charging stations are like the coupling point between two previously less engaged networks. We have the road transportation graph as well as power systems. And charging stations are a location where there's variability in grid impact in both time and space. As compared to buildings where you only look at their temporal load and their fixed space, vehicles and their charging load, say you might want to charge a fleet by 1 megawatt hour in a given week, it may vary where in the city they charge based on traffic conditions, spot pricing, and other variables that may affect where the vehicles are moving. Let's discuss a bit about the fleet operations first, just looking at ICE vehicles, not electric. The dispatcher needs to collect a batch of vehicles. Here we have vehicles A and B, and also customer ride requests. Here we have customer X waiting for a ride, and then Y is not yet requested, but we are predicting there could be a customer at that location. Although both A and B are close to X, B is maybe a closer distance, but provided that we know A is actually moving towards X, it's actually more system optimal to send B to Y. So this is important to have a system level view and not just greedily assign vehicles to the closest customer. While we do this, we're trying to optimize for travel costs, so avoiding as much empty deadhead travel as possible, and fuel costs. Okay, so with the basic fleet operations covered, we see that in electric fleet operations, there is a much greater challenge with this added charge dimension. Now in this scenario, say we have two electric ride-hail vehicles, the red one with 30% state of charge left, and the yellow one with 80% state of charge. Both are equal distance to picking up customer X, who's waiting for a ride. Which one do we assign? Well, first we want to verify, is red even an option? Is 30% charge enough to where passenger X wants to go? So we can confirm this. Okay, so red vehicle is still a candidate. What other information do we need to consider? Well, if we find out that this charging station here has plugs available and the electricity cost is low, it's at a super off-peak in the time of use rate, for example, and grid emissions are also low, that actually incentivizes us to dispatch the red lower state of charge vehicle to that direction, because we can take more advantage of this price and low carbon electricity. And instead we send the 80% state of charge vehicle to maybe a more expensive station elsewhere. Okay, so in the previous scenario, we were considering having a 50 kilowatt DC fast charging station there to charge that yellow vehicle. But what about the grid impact? We see that upstream, they actually are connected to the same distribution network or substation, and actually this will require upfront costs to upgrade this network, or maybe delays if we were to install a fast charging station at that location. So by also being grid aware, we understand that actually when optimizing operations and station placement, it was better to place a fast charging station on the western side of the city. And in fact, we can even install a level 2 station while still meeting the operational needs. So this will come at a lower cost because we don't need to upgrade the grid. And also, level 2 stations are cheaper to install than DC fast charging. Okay, So hopefully these animations and examples can help you appreciate the complexity of the problem that's added when we have these charge-constrained vehicles. How do we capture this in a mathematical model? We can frame this problem as a network flow problem. And here we design our graph such that, just taking out my laser pointer. So here we have a road graph and one particular slice of this stack graph here. And we copy this throughout charge levels. So the top level here could represent, say, 100% state of charge vehicles. The next one that's yellow maybe is 50% state of charge, red is 0. In practice, we'll have a lot more than 3 layers. We also need to copy this throughout time so we can capture the charging dynamics, which can be slow or fast depending on which type of station, as well as prices and travel demand in future time steps. So we see that the movement of these vehicles in this space charge time plot along these edges determine how the vehicles are being routed, as well as how they are being charged. Further, we can make the edge capacities variables as well, particularly at the charging stations, and this will dictate how many plugs we want to install of each charging type. A main advantage of this model is that its size in terms of number of variables does not scale with the number of variables does not scale with the number of vehicles. This is because we have a network flow approach. Here we have fluidic fractions of each fleet moving across the graph. So whether we have hundreds of cars or tens of thousands of cars, it's still the same number of variables. It does scale, however, with the number of edges in the graph. So the decision variables are the vehicle flows along every arc, the number of charging plugs for every candidate station, the peak charging that will occur at each site, and also the size of the fleet. Our objective includes electricity costs in terms of energy volume, as well as demand charges, which is based on the peak charging event in a given month. Travel costs, this is the empty deadhead travel. Fleet procurement costs for adding cars to the fleet, as well as charging station procurement costs. And again, level 2 stations will cost less than DC fast charger. In terms of constraints, we have definitions for our fleet size. We also here assume that all trip requests are being satisfied by this fleet and no customers are being dropped. We have the standard flow continuity and conservation for network flow problems. We also enforce periodicity to make sure that this problem is repeatable for the next following weekday. Without this, all the vehicles will be depleted and have no state of charge for the next day. Lastly, we also define what peak load and station capacities are in these constraints. Okay, so this problem is a linear program, which means we can solve it with off-the-shelf solvers like Robi, Mosaic, and so forth. And here, let's dive into some of the results using this model by looking at case study in San Francisco. We divide SF into 28 large spatial zones, and we look at a full 24 hours, which is important to capture the full electricity price variance throughout the day. Here we assume all vehicles are being served by this fleet, and we result in a problem that has over 10 million variables, but it's still tractable to solve within a day, so about 10 hours or so. 3 key findings are that optimal charging station siting is actually more spatially distributed than how we currently site stations today. We find that small, efficient EVs, despite their lower range, are feasible for this case study and more cost effective.
So,
Yes, Abbas.
can you see what the variables are again?
Yes.
There's so many things.
Yeah, sorry, there was a busy slide, but let me pause on this.
To go back, or you can just say it verbally.
Sure. The variables are the flows along this space, charge, and time graph. So when the vehicles are flowing from one location to another to either carry a passenger or to rebalance to a different part of the city, that flow is captured along one particular edge that we construct in this graph. When the vehicles are charging at a station, then we will have edges constructed in the graph for the vehicles to move up in charge level. And how fast they move up in terms of the charge and time dimensions depend on if it's a slow charging or fast charging station. So along each of these edges, we need to determine what is the flow of the vehicle while respecting flow conservation.
And you have already existing charging stations, or are you trying to determine what charging stations should be put in?
Yes, that's a great question. So we're trying to determine these charging stations.
So this is also variable.
Yes. And this variable is marked by the flow capacities on the charge edges. And the flow capacities are multiplied by some cost depending on if it was a fast edge or a slow edge for charging. Okay, so we compared this joint optimization, and by joint I mean both the operations aware as well as station siting. Compare it with a fairly strong baseline, which is also an optimization, but this one is not optimizing for charging infrastructure installation. Instead, it's using status quo installations and it's scaled up to a similar total capacity. Some initial observations, we see that travel demand impacts where the vehicles will charge, and when vehicles are moving to the commercial zones in 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. during the workday, there is more charging activity there. And when vehicles are moving back to residential areas away from downtown area, charging will also reflect that follow with travel demand. Some other observations, we see that the travel demand is quite impacted also by the electricity rate schedule. First, in the morning rush hour, there's a drop off in the charging, shown here in blue. But actually there's an increase in charging after rush hours when there's some more vehicles that are idle. This is also due to lower electricity price rate, shown here in the bottom dotted red plot here of 10 cents per kilowatt hour. However, in the evening peak electricity price, it increases by more than 3 times. It's 33 cents per kilowatt hour from 4 to 9 p.m. And the optimal fleet behavior is able to charge the vehicle sufficiently during the midday such that they can completely avoid charging in this expensive period.
What does rebalancing mean?
Yes, here rebalancing referring to empty vehicle travel, where the vehicles are proactively moving from one part of the city to another, either for charging or for picking up passengers that will they're forecasted to arrive there, or sorry, to start their trips. Okay, so when comparing that jointly optimal case with the other optimal case that doesn't consider charging infrastructure but only uses status quo, we see this difference, and we show the difference here by red being more of the optimized installation, white is 0, so they're equal, and then blue is a more baseline installation. So in current installations in San Francisco, there's a lot more charging concentrated in the commercial districts, but in an optimized scenario, we also want to install charging in the residential areas for overnight charging, and also where vehicles are ending their location at the end of the day, which is also when electricity prices fall back to non-peak prices. How does this impact total costs and impact on the grid? We see a 10% reduction in peak load by dispersing discharging across space and time. We also see 11% reduction in the total vehicle miles traveled, mostly due to less rebalancing needed by having the charging stations more closely available. And this results in a 9 to 10% total cost reduction. We see that the main driver for costs here, of course, is to buy the vehicles for operating the fleet. This is shown in the teal blue bar. And that motivates trying to use cheaper, smaller vehicles if they still meet your needs. And we find that even with a Dacia Spring with only 27 kilowatt hours, this is a compact car with a 150 mile range, it's actually sufficient for this robotaxi use case, even though robotaxis are highly utilized. So this is the first tier of cut of cost savings. We also see that because the Spring is a lighter weight vehicle, it's more efficient, and we use less energy to move the same number of miles. And what I'll point out here are maybe some less obvious cost savings as well. We have lower infrastructure costs because we're dispensing less energy to the vehicles because of their high efficiency. This also results in lower demand charges. And because they are charging less frequently, they rebalance less and also can serve more trips for the same number of vehicles. So these are all second-tier cost savings that we show like a nonlinear trend with each increment in efficiency improvement of the vehicle. Okay, so we conclude this first part with these first key takeaways. When solving this chicken-egg problem of operations or planning first, we devised a network flow model that can solve both jointly, so we don't have any suboptimality from solving them in sequence. This has a 10% reduction in total costs, as well as peak charging load on grid, as well as vehicle travel and congestion.
So in your optimization, did you assume one type of EVs, or the mix was also another variable? Or?
No, so that was more of a parameter search. So we have one fixed vehicle type, and then we compare the cost between these cases. In the appendix slides, I can show, actually, we can also do mixed vehicles as well. And there we mix a gasoline car or hybrid car and an EV, and we want to see how many vehicles.
The optimum mix would be all small cars then?
Yes, so if we, I don't have the slides for this, but when we include all different sizes of EVs, the small, medium, large, in San Francisco it was all small. Now, when we want to increase the spatial region, then the small vehicles can't serve the longest distance trips, so you start including a few of these medium vehicles. Yeah. Questions are great, thanks Abbas. Before I close this section, I'll leave with one future direction. In some of our previous works in the lab, we created a power in the loop MOD compared to just electric MOD. So this is creating the same stacked space charge time plot, but also connecting it with the power network as well. So you can see this is an even more complex, larger problem. But it does have its benefits for analysis. We see that we can have a 50% reduction in voltage violations for this case study for Orange County, and 99% reduction in overloads from the transformers. However, this is computation intensive and also assumes a high degree of coordination between the fleet operator as well as the power system operator, which may not be realistic. So I propose, a future direction would be how can we coordinate this using dynamic electricity prices or charging bounds that are passed maybe on a daily basis to the fleet operator. This is perhaps an avenue of future research. Okay, now we're going to shift gears to operations, also of an electric autonomous mobility on demand. So the goal here is to solve a large problem in real time and also try to maintain as much performance as possible. We find that bilateral framework combining optimization and graph reinforcement learning can achieve this, and we see better performance in heuristics while also being faster than a full optimization. There's also potential for transfer capabilities to new service areas. Okay, so let's give a recap about the real-time constraints here. We want to match and dispatch in seconds. Again, the customer needs to know the vehicle ETA and whether they want to accept this ride. But to have available vehicles to dispatch, we need to proactively put them in the right location, charge, and time. And this is achieved by rebalancing the vehicles and recharging them. The cost of doing this will depend on perhaps uncertain elements that we need to forecast, like travel demand and electricity prices if they are dynamic. Here, we also note that if we want to assume a 15-minute step size in this problem, that's at least 96 time steps if we're looking at a full day. So we revisit the previously discussed planning problem. If we just naively try to implement this, it doesn't scale well with growing space, charge, and time. And with 96 time steps, we have a 10 million variable problem that takes hours to solve, so that's not suitable for ride-hail dispatch. We're assuming perfect forecast for the previous planning problem. Okay for planning, but maybe not a good assumption for operations. One good thing, though, that we want to maintain is that invariance to the number of vehicles, because we do want to run this operations for thousands of cars. So how can we adapt this model for operations at scale? Well, one first easy thing to do is fix all the planning variables. So we already did analysis. We can determine what the charging infrastructure is best under a historic operations assumptions. And fleet size, vehicle design, tariff selection are all fixed. This does reduce some of the complexity problem, but not significantly, because ultimately we still have this large network flow that scales with space, charge, and time. So this still takes hours to solve, and we're still assuming a perfect forecast. I'm going to call this the upper bound, and we use model predictive control, such as solving this optimization repeatedly, and we call this MPC Oracle. Next, after MPC Oracle, let's talk about MPC with real-time constraints and also uncertainty considered. What if we shorten the time horizon? So instead of 96 time steps, maybe we only want to look at 1 hour ahead, so the next 4 time steps. So now we take minutes to solve. This is better, but still not fast enough for real-time purposes. And we are using forecasts here, but the extent that forecasts can be useful is also kind of limited to only our look ahead of now shortened to only 4 time steps. So we don't have a long-range view of electricity prices in the future or travel demand. Okay, what if we just drop the time dimension entirely? Okay, so now we just have a space charge graph. And if we were to solve this for dispatch, that would be okay, because greedy for dispatch is acceptable, as if we only want to find at the current time step what's the best vehicle to assign to the customers, and also which vehicle should do rebalancing, which vehicle should do recharging. But this is obviously a problem when we want to look at this for many time steps, as we will run out of vehicles because they're not in the right position in time. So yes, we're still left with the problem of how can we do the long-range planning aspect. So to combine the benefits of optimization, where we can do a cost-minimized dispatch, we add graph reinforcement learning to now fulfill that hole of the long-range planning that we lost by cutting out the time dimension. We break it down into 3 steps. So every time step, in the first step here, we are solving an optimization problem where we determine the vehicle rider flows and matchings to maximize profits, subject to what vehicles are available, and also what is the current travel demand forecast. This problem here actually only varies in number of edges in the row graph. We don't even need to expand it by the charge dimension, because all we need to do here is query which vehicles have sufficient charge. So we don't actually need to maintain that stacked charge graph as well. Okay, next into the meat of this body of work is the graph reinforcement learning agent. So here, this agent is performing actions on a node level rather than edge level, and it's predicting what is the best distribution of available vehicles on this space charge graph. Then we use an optimization to take this desired distribution that was specified by the reinforcement learning agent, and we dispatch vehicles to try to match as close as possible to this desired distribution. So here we're trying to minimize the cost of doing this rebalancing, recharging, while also adding a penalty term for the deviation between the desired distribution and the end result. And this, of course, is subject to the vehicles that are available. So to do a recap comparing just a full optimization MPC, there we have the number of edges spaced with scales of space, charge, and time. This is great for solving it jointly and getting a very optimal result, but it's not amenable for real-time performance. Instead, we have this bi-level formulation using both optimization and reinforcement learning, where we delegate the optimization to solve the dispatching and the long-range planning to the reinforcement learning agent. Okay, so in setting up this experiment, we have data for travel demand and electricity prices for a New York case study as well as San Francisco, and we trained the agent in the learning phase with this simulated network, And this training can take weeks, long time, but this is all done before deployment. So at deployment time, using this pre-trained policy, the inferences only take a few seconds. Now, let's dive into some of the performance results. So in terms of total system performance, in terms of the total fleet costs, we see that heuristics, heuristics are substituting that middle step of graph reinforcement learning by just doing a rule-based way of assigning vehicles to rebalance of the charge. The performances are on order of 30% relative to the Oracle performance. Compare that to our graph reinforcement learning approach, where we have performances ranging from 50 to high 80%. So more than double heuristic performances. They also are close to an MPC performance, but they do so in a much faster solve, which I'll get into in the next slide here. So looking at computational analysis, in the plot below, this orange is showing MPC. So this is not MPC Oracle, but this is the MPC with a limited horizon. And even here, we can see it scales polynomially with, yes, Abbas.
The first column under MPC is no longer percentages, or what happened?
Sorry. I'll better explain this table here. So the first column for each category is percentage of performance relative to the Oracle.
Oh.
And this is in thousands of dollars.
I understand.
And then the second column is runtime. Yeah. Sorry, it's a very compact table. Yeah. But noting again that the performance is nearing MPC, but it's able to do so at a much faster runtime. And in other works we're comparing to, we're trying to strive for a 10-second real-time performance. We're actually able to meet that in all these scenarios up to 20 zones. An interesting feature of this train policy is that it's actually readily available to dispatch in new settings. So if we were to expand our service territory, let's say we originally had 10 zones of San Francisco, but we want to map to 20 zones. Even without training in the 20-zone network, we can achieve 66% performance relative to the Oracle baseline. And that far exceeds any of the heuristics. We even see this when transferring to new cities. So the learnings of the reinforcement learning agent about transportation networks and charging in general can actually transfer from New York to SF and SF to New York and still beats heuristics. So key takeaways from this body of work is we present a framework combining both optimization and graph reinforcement learning to solve real-time electric MOD at scale. We see that it outperforms heuristics and achieves this in a faster compute time than just a pure optimization approach. And our simulation results also demonstrate promising transfer and generalization to new cities or service area expansions. Okay, shifting to the last body of work. Here we're talking about how to integrate distributed energy resources to further accelerate our decarbonization of electric fleets and also reduce costs under careful coordination. First, I'll motivate this by explaining how 100% renewable annual match is not the same as 24/7 hourly matching of carbon-free electricity to our fleet charging and why this is important. Then we'll go into some insights from this optimal bus fleet behavior and battery energy storage system operations, or BESS, and how this is a very adaptable framework to different electricity and carbon pricing assumptions. So we've seen this slide before. This is a recap of how charging impacts power systems, and that could involve expensive grid upgrades or lengthy interconnection times. To avoid this, what if we can leverage distributed energy resources? This is what motivates this section here. We focus on the Stanford Marguerite as our case study, the bus shuttle that we here have on Stanford campus. So Stanford only had diesel buses as back in 2013, and they had 2,800 tons of carbon emissions per year. And they started electrifying their buses up to almost 40 electric buses today. Yet, as we saw in our earlier slide, this still doesn't mean that they're completely carbon-free. Even if Stanford purchases 100% of their electricity consumption with matches from renewable energy credits, from on-campus solar as well as off-campus, we see that there's still going to be impacts on the total system emissions. Here we're showing in blue bus charging data from the Stanford Marguerite bus fleet. It occurs this is for one day, and it occurs at all hours, sometimes in the past midnight and during the midday, as well as most of it in the evening. This is the solar array that's installed at the Stanford Marguerite bus depot. It's a 1.8 megawatt installation. Some of the bus charging does coincide with this carbon-free electricity, but most of it falls outside of the solar envelope. In fact, it falls during times when the electricity grid mix on the California grid is actually at its highest emission factors. In conclusion, we see that there's still going to be emissions impact, and charging is not carbon-free just by purchasing energy credits. How can we address this? Well, we devised a carbon-free electric fleet management platform where first we need to forecast grid emissions, PV solar generation at the depot, as well as the bus energy consumption, which can vary by weather and the driver and other external factors. We're optimizing for the bus route assignments, as well as bus charging schedule, and how to best dispatch the battery charging and discharging to make the most of the carbon-free electricity stored from the solar installation. We will analyze these power flows to calculate the cost of operating this, as well as the total emissions, counting hourly basis. And we perform these forecasts using real telemetry data from the Stanford Marguerite. Let me break down this plot here and go step by step in some of these observations we make in the optimized behavior. So in the baseline, charging just occurs whenever the buses return to depot. The drivers just plug them in when they go back, and that often is going to be on weekday evenings. We also see here in yellow, this is the solar generated at the depot. Okay, moving to the optimized scenario. The first observation is that bus charging, shown in blue, as well as battery charging, shown in red, is taking place on this weekday. This is a Sunday. I should say that this is actually 7 days, marked by the dotted lines. So, this weekend activity is possible. There is staff on Stanford Marguerite. They just don't make advantage of the weekends because that's not when they return the buses and plug in. But instead, if from this optimization, we suggest that they defer some of the charging that occurs, let's say Friday night, Thursday night, to the weekend, then we can take more advantage of the solar generation as well as cheaper electricity rates. Second observation here is green here denotes charging directly from the power grid rather than being supplied from the battery or from the solar directly. We actually don't see much green at all in this optimized scenario, and it only occurs when the grid emissions are zero. Grid emissions here are shown by carbon price in brown. So yeah, the price is now zero, and the optimization determines it's fine to charge from the grid.
This is the first time you use a battery, right? This one's not having batteries.
Yes, this is the first work that includes a battery storage.
Where did it come from? What is it?
So the battery is not yet installed. So that is hypothetical, but we're working there. But the bus data is all real.
Yeah, I was surprised.
It's been a process. Yeah. Okay. So we see that the battery and buses in the optimized scenario are charging more during the daytime when we have solar generation. So that involves deliberately not charging all your vehicles fully in the evening, such that you have enough spare capacity to take advantage of the carbon-free electricity in the next following day. Lastly, we note that the battery is discharging, shown in pink. It's small here, but that discharge is actually occurring when the forecasted peak load for the Stanford campus is in that month. So that's helping decrease some of Stanford's peak demand charge. Additionally, the buses are being delivered to not charge during this period as well to add to this demand charge. Lastly, we see for buses that return in the late evening, such as the late night OCA shuttle, can still be recharged by having any reserve battery capacity that was stored from carbon-free charging during the daytime. The result of this optimized performance over a 10-year horizon, and assuming electricity prices increase at 5% a year, which is quite aggressive, but this is maybe an upper bound on benefits. We see 0.9 million from these energy charge reductions by shifting our electricity prices to lower price periods. 1.4 million reduction from demand charge peak shaving by the battery discharging and also avoiding bus charging. And additionally, by having this battery unit, we can avoid purchasing additional diesel buses, which are slated for purchase next year, because we have more battery capacity for a power outage to support the electric buses. What's impressive is besides these cost savings, we also achieved emissions reduction of 98%. Concluding this section here, let's look at some sensitivity analysis to different scenarios if we have a different depot with different electricity prices, for example. We see that under net billing tariff, which is the new solar policy moving forward for how excess solar energy is sold and revenue incurred, it's less favorable than previous NEM 2.0 policy, where the MBT price, the net billing tariff price, is shown here in brown. So the price you get for exporting excess solar is in general lower than, let's say, the blue time of use rate that you previously could have enjoyed in under NEM 2.0. Also, the net billing tariff price is more dynamic in nature. So we see under these more dynamic electricity prices, this complexity is where optimization really benefits compared to just an optimized, a baseline approach of plugging in whenever you return to depot. And we see a 30% reduction in cost savings under the new NBT NEM 3.0 policies compared to previous solar policies. Last point I want to make is the sensitivity to carbon pricing. So for depots that already have sufficient solar, here we denote 100% as the current installation we have on campus. Even with half of that installation, so 0.9 megawatt rooftop solar, we see that emissions don't vary with the price of carbon that we add to the objective function, because that the cost optimal operations is already actually emissions optimal too. However, we see that in depots with reduced solar, so 25% or 0%, we do yield additional emissions reduction when we introduce a signal in the objective function, such as a carbon price. Although this does come at a cost, a carbon abatement cost of $66 per ton. If we increase the price further, this has diminishing returns as there's only so much the bus fleet can shift its charging to carbon-free hours. Okay, so to wrap up this section, we see 2.3 million in electricity bill savings over a 10-year period and 98% reductions in the optimistic case, perfect forecast for optimizing a bus fleet with batteries and distributed battery and solar installations. This impact is even more pronounced under new net billing tariff policies, and we see carbon pricing can also play a role when you don't have enough solar at your depot. All right, to conclude our talk, we talked about solving the planning problem of where to put charging stations and size our vehicles. And we connected that to the operations problem by adapting this and including graph reinforcement learning so that we can solve it in real time. Thirdly, we included solar and storage to achieve 24/7 carbon-free energy matching for the electric bus fleet here on Stanford campus. This opens several directions for future research. First is mapping the last piece, so we have optimal control across the spatial temporal scales. So although the first and second is not too challenging to connect, you just need to fix your planning optimal variables and then pass them to the second work, which is the real-time operations. We still are missing the piece of dispatching the optimal flows to the individual vehicle level. And how to do this in a way that is minimizing mismatch and across the different spatial temporal scales is, I think, a challenge. Second is we can validate our results in high fidelity grid and traffic simulators, and also in real world deployments. So continuing our work with the Stanford Marguerite shuttle. Uncertainty elements include weather, exogenous electricity loads, prices, traffic congestion, which all should be examined, and also more unexpected events such as power outages, road closures, or equipment failures such as charging stations breaking down or robotaxis losing connection. Lastly, we're not limited in these methods to just mobility fleets. Perhaps we can also electrify other centrally managed fleets by adapting some of these methods to electric aviation, short and long haul logistics, delivery robots and drones, and micromobility. That concludes my talk. Thank you for coming. I'm just going to show some publications and the references for the slides, and I welcome your questions. We'll first address questions in the room, and then we'll also look at the Zoom questions as well.
So you look at the demand response revenue stream for the battery and the charging station as well?
For the bus fleet work, the demand response. We did not look at demand response in this setting. Though from preliminary work, we think that it doesn't coincide too much with or doesn't compete with the savings that we achieve, because most of the savings is from peak demand charge shaving. So as long as the demand response arbitrage and prices are regular throughout the month, and we can still also shave the peak, then we can actually value stack both demand response and peak shaving.
Yeah, it could be an interesting topic because I see that the huge stack value with the battery and charging. There's also another piece with demand response. So interesting to see how you, because you can, probably the optimal way to discharge the battery so that you get the best out of the demand reduction and also revenue from the demand response.
Yes, yeah. I think that would be interesting to add to our current value stack as well. Thank you, Wesley. Yes.
In the first part, you were talking about adding charging stations, different sizes and locations.
Yes.
When you have the option to choose among them, does it include the cost for electricity system upgrades?
You can. So we have a variable for system upgrade costs, and there we just assume some flat dollar value per kilowatt to make it linear. That wasn't shown for the slides work here. It's some ongoing research, but it's actually implementable in the linear program. Yeah. Brandon?
Yeah, so also about part one,
Yes.
when we're kind of formulating for the graph, right? So are
Yes.
the loads like in that graph, like candidate positions for charging stations?
That's correct.
So like the potential charging sites are kind of fixed.
That's correct. So in the San Francisco case study, the device San Francisco into 28 large zones. So these nodes are not just like specific intersections; they're more like multiple city blocks. So we treat that as like a candidate area of the city to install charging stations.
Okay, just a quick question, like how did you determine those zones?
So there we did clustering based on the travel demand. So original data set had 190 zones, and we clustered them based on a way that will avoid cutting too many travel between the zones. I think I saw Mark next and then Oscar.
I have two questions. One is for related to this. I think in one slide you found that the ideal or optimal distribution of chargers would be more distributed as opposed to baseline, which is reality rate. So I was wondering, did you also consider like or did you get out of that optimization like a different number of chargers in total, or were you working with that as a static number?
That's a great question. So actually, we compute the optimized case first. We find what's the total capacity in terms of like megawatts or even gigawatts installed across the whole city. And when we scale up the baseline scenario such that it has an equal amount of capacity, but just a different distribution. And as a result, they both have the same like gross capacity, but they could have different number of plugs depending on how they're distributed between, say, level 2 or DC fast charging.
All right, that's fascinating. Thank you. And a quick question on number 3. I really liked how you visualized throughout the week the bus load optimization.
Thanks.
I was wondering what method did you use to get that optimized reshuffling of the charging times? Was it your own method, or did you use a solver?
Yes, so here we devise a mixed integer linear program. It's integer because we have to treat each bus and route discretely. And yeah, once we devise the program, we just put it into, say, Groby to solve.
Got it. Thank you.
Oscar.
Great work, and it's really exciting to see like solar and bus or EV charging co-located. I was wondering what are some of these benefits of like co-locating them, or are they fully accounted for with the reduction in the demand, peak demand charges?
Sorry, so the question is the benefits of co-locating the solar and batteries with charging captured compared to, or sorry, can you rephrase maybe the last part?
Yes, sorry, I wasn't very clear. Yeah. So I was wondering if there's further benefit beyond just reducing the peak demand charge for campus for this co-location approach of solar and bus charging.
Well, it also provides a source of carbon-free electricity that we can dispatch or sell back to the rest of campus to reduce their carbon emissions in the evening. So particularly in the summer where we have a lot of excess generation from that solar installation, the battery is very useful for delivering carbon-free electricity where it actually has most impact, which is evening. Yeah. Sorry, does that answer your question? Okay.
Any other questions from the audience?
We want to leave a couple minutes for acknowledgements as well, but is there any questions from the Zoom chat? Nope. Okay. Should we move to acknowledgements? Okay. Well, first I want to thank my committee